Tom, can you hear me okay?
All right, I can hear you, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Okay, folks, it looks like we've got, let's see. We've got a quorum. So I guess we'll call the April 6th, 2022 Hartford School Director meeting to order. This is a week early due to the school vacation next week. Are there any changes, additions, and we will move on to approval after that. Tom,
I think we got everything. I added the executive session. I do think you're going to want to do that. Meeting minutes in there. There are some appointments tonight. 'Tis the season, so that's added from our recent agenda.
Yeah.
All right, I'd then like to move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. So we'll move right on to Global Ends reporting. Review of the district's ends policies in relation to current events.
So, can you hear me, Coach?
Yes. Yeah.
Beautiful. So what we thought we would focus on this week is where our students have taken place both in citizenship and life skills through the mask policies that have happened throughout the school year, and how they have learned to interact with the school board, with their teachers, with administration, and even most recently, learning how to communicate with their superintendent to share how they feel about the rules. The students have done an unbelievable job learning how to take in all the information through the school board meetings, and then relay how that information, along with their hopes and their feelings, and how it impacts them in their daily life, and been able to have a productive dialogue with the people that they've had a conversation with, which I think is, in terms of the ends, one of a huge takeaway. It's very transferable skill based in terms of, regardless of content, they're going to have skills from this that they'll be able to use in their future wherever they are. So a short, sweet one tonight, but we just wanted to applaud the students who have been following along and sharing their opinions with us.
Okay, so something, and I think that's very important, because one of the things we need to be working on is indicators. So right there, you just laid some framework for starting indicators, and hopefully that continues going forward type thing. And what I would like to see is like a benchmark set this year, and then maybe report back in the future saying, here's what happened last year. The students have either made progress or gone the other way, and then what we can do about it.
Absolutely.
And that makes great sense. Any other comments from other board members?
I think Russ covered it.
But Russ, I think you bring up a great point in that masks and a lot of the COVID guidance have been very authentic and applicable situations for students to engage with the school board. That may be something that we want to press ourselves in the future, that we are ensuring that we have topics that would be engaging to the student population. It can become real business oriented on occasion, and where students maybe don't see how a school budget impacts their daily life, even though it does, but they might not see the immediate impact. Whereas when you folks are talking about mask mandates and talking about, the science and what might happen, they know tomorrow there's going to be an immediate impact in their school life. So I think that's just something for us to keep in mind in terms of engaging the population.
Absolutely. We made it real. It's real.
Exactly.
Because I mean, theoretical gets uninteresting,
What's
especially for a
possible.
teenager,
Mhm.
having been there long ago.
Well,
Well, that's one of the specialty concerns. Everybody's gone to school.
Well, we certainly, Coach, could be deliberate in our connections to how something might impact the student or faculty,
Mm.
So even budget. This will impact in, more teachers in classrooms or more clinicians in the school or less something, more extracurricular
Right.
offerings or less.
Mhm.
Might be nice to be sort of more explicit about how things the board is voting on impacts the different stakeholders.
Well, that's part of refining, our governance model. And we've been doing that since the very beginning. And it seems that it never stops continuing to improve, our process. And that's critical, I think, and that's what will hopefully continue to help the district overall. So thanks for Russ, your comments, and the rest of the board. So let's move on to our student representative report. And another example.
Thank you, Coach. Like Mr. Hathorn, this one's going to be a pretty short and sweet one. In the high school, we are now in our fourth quarter. Spring break is right around the corner. Spring sports have started back up. And so there's a lot of excitement and a lot of hopefulness towards the future. There are a lot of other really exciting things happening in school right now, too. Currently, there is a service trip that is in Puerto Rico. A whole bunch of Hartford High School seniors are down there now. They're doing things like working at rainforest ecological preserves, traveling the island to meet with community leaders who have been affected by natural disasters, but then also seeing some really cool places like the bioluminescent bay. And it's been a very long time since we've had these sort of service trips because COVID stopped a lot of that. And there's a lot of excitement in the school about this happening and what trips might be coming down the pipe in the future. Also, too, the other really big thing that's happening in schools and is a real moment of hope is the way that students have been reacting to mask mandates and changes in policy. Like Mr. Hathorn had mentioned, students are finding ways to get engaged, informing themselves about school board meetings, reaching out to both me as a student rep, and also, as Mr. Hathorn shared, reaching out to the superintendent, Mr. Nabalzi, directly. And so it has been really, really amazing to see how engaged people are trying to get, and also how resilient the student body is. It was really hard for us to go from mask optional to then having the mask policy back in place. But students were very, very resilient and sort of buckled down and said, all right, if this is what I need to do, then I'm going to continue doing it, even if I may not want to. And just the willingness to keep sticking together and keep upholding that great sense of community has been really, really amazing. And I've loved watching it.
Great. Sydney?
As Olivia pretty much said, to add on to it, there has been a drastic change, I feel like, in emotions and in mental health as well within the student body, as a lot of students are more excited in some senses to be at school now, as well as showing more enjoyment and excitement, and a lot more students are intrigued in being in their classes and being with their peers. I believe that has a point to do with the mask situation, as everybody can see each other's faces again, pretty much. And it's just more of a positive area to be in now, sort of in the school. Another thing to add on about the Puerto Rico trip, originally it was to Peru. However, due to COVID, they originally wanted to cancel it, but a lot of students who were on that trip are very glad, I guess, to and are very happy to be on the trip because they luckily changed the trip to Puerto Rico, which was a closer destination, and they were able to do that regardless of even COVID going down and pretty much being less of a pandemic and more of an epidemic now, I'd say.
One quick
That's all I really have to
correction,
add.
Sydney.
Yeah.
It was a trip to Ecuador, not a trip to Peru.
Sorry, my bad. Thank you,
It's all
Olivia.
right. I just wanted to clear that up and make sure everyone was on the same page.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Well, with all of the options we had, you know, this time period, it's just amazing that the resiliency is showing, and you know that is primary. Any other comments or questions to our high school reps? Okay. Mr. Superintendent, you have the floor.
Thank you. Since it's fresh in my mind to talk about the Ecuador trip, it was really hard for me when the time came to approve the trip early in the school year. We all thought it was a great idea, and it's something that I've always supported in the years that I've been here. The trips outside the country and the service trips, especially to South America and even.
If you speak up just a bit, because there's no
Oh,
PA, they can't hear you very well.
even
And that's really loud.
that's really
Yes.
loud tonight. I don't know why.
Sorry.
And the trip to Southeast Asia a few years ago. So the trips have been really important to the administration and part of our mission. So we did initially approve that trip, but then when it came time to make the final payments, can you hear okay now?
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
When it came time to make the final decision, it was in that period after the holidays in January that was really, really high COVID counts. And I just was too nervous about sending students outside of the country because I wasn't sure if they had a problem or they had a COVID case at that time, they would have had to quarantine in the country. And a staff member would have had to stay with them, which would have really created some problems for us. So we decided to not let them go, but they were resilient again. They came up with another trip that had many of the same benefits as the trip to Ecuador, but was within the United States territories. So I'm glad that worked out, but just want to explain a little bit about how it changed, and I still feel like it was the right decision, even though things are a little bit better now. It's still a little risky. So my report, on the 23rd of March, we had 3 teachers honored at the UVM Outstanding Educators Awards, and I just want to mention them tonight. Sean Cassidy, who is an auto body teacher at the Tech Center. Felicia Hayes, who is the nurse that you've come to know from her role as a COVID coordinator, but she was the high school and tech center outstanding educator, and Lindsay Wadley, who is the music teacher at the Ottaquiche School and the White River School. So those are our 3 outstanding educators, and they had a ceremony online this year. Usually in non-COVID times, it's a really nice ceremony up at UVM in the Davis Hall. And they have a really nice hors d'oeuvres and presentations, and it's a really good night. But they did the best they can with it online the last 2 years. Let me see. I think things have changed in the district quite a bit since our last regular meeting. Definitely feel like spring is in the air. Kids are outdoors and you get them playing and laughing and having fun. And that's kind of always been music to our ears as educators around the schools and on the campus. Things that certainly seem to be a little more normal. A lot of testing going on this time of year in the schools, STAR testing, SBAC testing. Obviously, at the high school, kids are anxiously awaiting or have received their college admission letters, so it's always an exciting time in the schools. Administrators are really busy with hiring right now. Contracts are due Friday for both administrators and teachers. A lot of movement this year. There's always been a lot of movement, but I think this year is going to be a little bit higher than normal. So we'll see what happens come Friday as far as who's returning and who's not. And a couple extensions out there. Couple of things I wanted to mention to the board that have been mentioned to me several times. The topics for the facilities meeting, trying to schedule a facilities district facilities meeting for right after the vacation, but Dance's Corner, which is adjacent to the White River School, is for sale. So I want to bring that up with the facilities committee, see if that's anything of interest. It is listed for $575,000. And the property next to the superintendent's office is also for sale again. And that's listed for $258,000. That's the house on the corner of Highland. Just wanted you to be aware of that and thinking about the future of the school district. As you know, the White River School has really inadequate parking. So we usually lease a few spaces, which has worked out really well from Dance's Corner. And I guess the last thing is vacation is next week. So a lot of folks are going away and traveling, and I'm really excited just to have a week off with warmer weather, hopefully without much mud. That's my report for tonight. A lot of the COVID information will be covered later on in the agenda or next. Any questions or?
You're muted, Coach.
Trying to be aware, outside noises, kitty cats, things of that sort. Any questions for our superintendent?
I have a question, just curiosity question. I'm just sort of wondering, thinking about the Dancer's Corner property and thinking about, I know over the years we've had a lot of discussion about space in the White River School. I'm just sort of curious if there's any discussion or ideas that are already out there about how that building beyond the parking lot and all the benefit that would bring, but how the building itself would be used if that was something.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest need and the thought right now is certainly for preschool.
Oh, preschool,
Yeah.
that's a great idea.
Be it, preschool for White River School or just preschool for the whole district, as far as consolidating services into one location. I'm not sure if everyone could fit there, but it's something that we really think about a lot because, first of all, there's a lot of providers in preschool and they travel around from school to school. So a lot of time is wasted traveling in between schools and in the support services. So if we were in one location, I think kids and the district would benefit from just that consolidation and more time, access to the specialists. So that is probably number one idea.
And we used to do that years ago. We were, all the school district had pre-K over at the White River School, if I recall.
And pre-K is interesting in the schools because it requires some different building the attributes are different. Nancy could attest to that, window heights and different, sink heights and different, toilet
Yeah.
height. A lot of stuff is a little bit different than the regular K through 5, population. So it's hard to expand outside of the rooms that they have currently.
Well, I think that, that brings us back to your question, Hava, is a poignant one around the work of the facilities committee. And that I think timing is always important. And I think that the fact that we instituted the committee and formulated it and ready to stand up, timing couldn't be better for us to come back with recommendations from them and do the outreach and questioning, and come back with proposals for the rest of the board. So.
Yeah. And I mentioned the property on Highland Avenue, a few years ago, you bought the couple house. And that'll be one of the primary topics for the facilities committee to discuss. But I can't help but think for the future, probably long after I'm gone, but they're not making, more property. And
right.
It would be very nice for the district to own that corner and the other house, and then we would own that entire block basically, and really be able to think about, future of district daycare for staff and sort of affordable housing, maybe for new staff, and just keep your options open. So that's why I bring it up. I know that both properties are a lot of money, and it's a big deal for school boards to consider making real estate purchases, but I also want to make sure you're considering the future and what that might hold for district. As they always say, they're not making more land, so you just got to consider it each time that it comes up for sale, and do so, with the thoughts of what the future might hold for the Hartford School District.
Well, they are critical decisions, and I think that that's why it's so important that we do have that input from a very specialized committee looking at that with a lot of intentionality. So upward and onward on that one. Any other questions for Tom on his report? If not, let's move on to governance process, COVID protocols. Tom.
COVID protocols. I didn't want to belabor this. We all know where we are from the last meeting we had, and the new protocols that the COVID coordinators and I supported at that last meeting. But right now, my recommendation would certainly be to stay the course. I think you have a really good protocol in place and a really good process, and you're connected to the science that's led us successfully to this point. We've had very few closures. Well, actually no closures of the big schools. We've had isolated closures for the regional resource center one day. Recently there wasn't enough staff to safely run the program, so we closed for one day. And then a few months back we closed the autism program at the Wilder School because of not enough staff. But those programs are very specialized, and they really depend on the full complement of highly trained staff. You can't just bring in every sub from the district and expect to run those programs safely. So we have had a lot of concerns, as the board can attest to, lots of emails and communications. But for me, when I tabulate that up, there's probably as many for our protocols, supporting our protocols as there are against our protocols and wanting to have no masks permanently. Though I couldn't say that one was outweighed the other for sure. And then I also found the U.S. Secretary of Education, his letter outlining the framework that the national government has supported and wants us to use, identifying community levels of transmission, which is what we're doing with the CDC data. And all of that is really in support of the schools providing for high levels of equity and inclusion for all students. So, when we're wearing our masks or we're using those protocols, what we're really doing is ensuring that our schools stay open. And sometimes wearing a mask is not just for the person wearing it, it's for everyone else around them, and especially for those with compromised immune systems or serious disabilities that COVID would really cause a lot of complications and severe health impact. So I think people really need to consider the greater community when they're worried about our protocols and whether or not they're too strict, and the inconvenience of not wearing a mask, because it's not just for yourself, it's for everyone else. And I've been really supportive of what we've done and continue to be. So love to hear where the board's at with all that. I know I've put the secretary's letter in the folder for tonight, so hopefully some people have read it and can speak to that.
Comments from the board?
Yes, Coach. Two things. Tom, just so we make it absolutely clear, could you spell out what your discretionary power is under the presently adopted policy?
I guess my discretionary authority is to implement what the board voted on at the last meeting. So when the CDC guidance changes on a Thursday, that's what I follow. So if they say the transmission level in Windsor County is high, the masks go back on immediately. If the transmission level is low, the masks are optional. So that's about the extent I think of
No,
mine.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
But I just, because I can't speak for my fellow board members, but I absolutely support that policy. But I also think it's very important we make it absolutely clear that right now we're in a fortunate period. And heaven forbid we get to a point where it's high again, it may be deemed necessary to re-implement the masks. Masks haven't gone away despite what we all hope. And
That's exactly what we've done. As you know, we had masks optional for a week. Right after the board decided that was the guidance that we wanted to support. And then the following week, the CDC data said that transmission in Windsor County was high. So we immediately went back to masks are mandatory, required. And we did get a little pushback, but everyone, for the most part, they complied, and there were a few kids who wouldn't, very few, and they weren't allowed to go to class because this is a little different than just breaking the school rule. This is a safety protocol designed to keep everyone else in the class safe. So we don't see it as something that you can say, yeah, you can just refuse to wear your mask and be in class. So that's where it's a little different than a regular school rule where maybe you can be non-compliant, receive some sort of consequence for it, but continue in the regular schedule. This is a safety concern. That's why the board supported it. That's why it's in place. You can't be in the regular class schedule course school day. Some students, refused to put the mask on. They either stayed in the office, isolated, or they decided to go home. But we didn't allow it. At some point, you know, that's the rule that we gotta support it. If nobody likes it. I don't want kids to miss out on their school day, but it's a safety, health issue, so.
And it follows with the number one objective of keeping in-person education. Because one of the few things that there is very little dispute on is the absolute benefit of in-person education. And this is something the board and yourself have deemed necessary to ensure we can continue to do that throughout the school year. And yes, people can disagree, but the other thing that has concerned me is the fact that there was some level of verbal intimidation occurring at the high school, and that is just not acceptable. Either way, whatever your position is, you have to respect the rights of others.
We did have some folks protesting on the front lawn, which I consciously allowed because I think people have a right to state their opinion. And I guess the part that I didn't care for was some folks yelling at students that they didn't need to wear their masks, and you know, the administration can't tell them what to do. In this case, yes, we can. It's a rule, and the school board has voted on it, and I intend to enforce it. That's my job. So, yeah, that will not be tolerated again. If that comes up, we will ask people to be quiet and protest quietly, but not yell at students as they enter school.
That's
Or
unacceptable. Yeah.
So-
It wasn't
Go
widespread.
ahead.
It wasn't a large group. It was very, very small, limited, but it was still offensive, I'm sure, to the students that were yelled at.
Was that Hava that had a question for Tom?
That was me, Coach. Thanks. It wasn't a question. I just wanted to say I really appreciated the delicate line that you guys walked with the subject, because tensions were high. And a lot of the communication we received, I agree, Tom, was a very emotional, both for and against. And one of the things that I was most surprised by, some of it was a little verbally intimidating and a little bullish, if not bullyish, I have to say. But also there seemed to be a general misunderstanding of the way the process works. And there were some insinuations that the school board was meeting behind closed doors and pushing an agenda, where I just think it's very important to make clear that the school board has only public meetings. We had a meeting, we made a policy. The policy was, please follow best practices in accordance with CDC expectations or reports of our current levels. You took that policy, you implemented yes masking, no masking, and there was no conspiracy of any kind to single out some people over other people, but instead an effort to just take a policy and then have it implemented as it related to changing health conditions. So I just think it's very important to make sure that that part was very clear. I was very concerned by the fact that we had some people who just didn't seem to understand how that was working. And so as a community and as a community body, I'm very concerned about making sure that people understand that this is a transparent process, that nothing was going on in secret, and that if there are questions that you could reach out to anybody before you're mad and just ask questions. You don't have to wait until you're mad and then feel as if you're not being addressed properly or your opinions aren't being respected. Reach out and ask the questions. That's what we're all here for. And I will just add also that when a letter is sent to the entire board of directors, there are some policies, and maybe Coach, you want to talk about, or just reiterate what the rules are when you send a letter to the entire school board will not respond to you. Right, Coach, will you tell us about that?
Right, because that constitutes a meeting.
Right.
And that is out of compliance with open meeting law. So even replying all in an email is constituted as inappropriate in open meeting law as well. That's why you don't see us having conversations over email, because that is totally inappropriate. And even when we go into executive session, which we don't do that often, there is a very strict protocol by law for us to adhere to. And you'll notice that we read the context for moving into executive session, and then any action that the board does take is always done in public session. And that is another piece, of the open meeting law protocol. And it does help us maintain transparency.
Thank you, Coach.
Other board members comments?
I suppose one other comment.
Yes, go ahead, Olivia.
Sorry, one other comment I might make on the matter of emails is that if you are emailing the student representatives, we're students, so we may not be able to respond back to you. And also too, if it's like an issue or something like that that you want to bring to our attention, we are non-voting members of the board, and so we may not be able to help you, and most likely can't help you. But we still appreciate hearing your feedback. And if there was something that you appreciated that we did, we always love to hear that too.
Good point.
Coach, this is Nancy. If you couldn't tell by the squeak.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
So the public does need to know that we can share information. But usually if we are sharing information, we're not asking anything. I do my Vermont State School Board Association report just as an FYI. You guys can trash it or read it or do whatever you need to do with it. But we are allowed to do that. And if we have to set up a meeting time, we are also allowed to do that. But you're right. Otherwise, we don't conduct any business at all via email.
So,
that's a communication through our association, which
Right.
the Hartford School Board pays dues to
Yes, we do.
participate in. So that's a function, of our organization. And they do provide a lot of information for school boards across the state, both in professional development and organizational development as well.
so Coach,
Yes.
there is one practice which I'm not sure that we have continued from the past, that we perhaps ought to make sure continues, which is that while we don't engage in conversation with people who send us emails because we're not really allowed to, we have always asked the clerk of the court of the district, school district, to respond to people who let them know that we have received their email, just so they know it hasn't dropped into a black hole and that the email system is working. I'm able to bring this up because I'm not the clerk and I'm not the one who would have to do the work.
Or didn't do the work.
I would point out that somebody has been involved in doing other people's taxes for quite some time. And this is the season when sleep is very short and free time is non-existent.
True, and I mean, I
But
do
I-
my best, but I haven't
Right.
necessarily done that to the extent that the public deserves. So that's something I'm aware of and we'll try to fix.
That was not a
And-
criticism anyway.
No,
No,
and-
don't take
and
it
there
that
are
way.
times,
It's a legitimate
right.
point.
right. But there are times that we cover for each other, too, when asked. So that's, that's another piece to
I
that.
think,
to
I
that
think that's
puzzle.
an entirely appropriate, Tom, if you wanted to approach somebody and say, could you cover for me? We just can't have multiple people answering. It just
Exactly.
One to say, the board has heard your comment, seen your comment,
Mhm.
and we will take it under advisement.
Right. So if there's no other comments there, we had
Yeah,
asked, there was a question previously from a board meeting. Oh, geez. 2 board meetings ago, just before reorganization, there was a question, around process as far as board member conflict of interest. That came up as a public question. So we had asked our superintendent, Tom, to speak with the board's attorney, who happens to be the same firm that we've been using, since 2011. So they're really vested in this district and understand how we operate. And Tom consulted with our attorney, and he has a response for us back. So Tom, you have the floor again.
Thank you. I shared the response in the packet for tonight, so the board members and the public can see that. It is an opinion from the board's attorney, so it's totally open to anyone to read. Very specifics if you want to see the details, but the long and the short of it is the attorney does not feel it's a conflict for a board member who is a parent of a teacher or an employee to serve. He does feel it's a conflict for that board member to be on a committee that negotiates the contract. So if the board member's son or daughter is a teacher, the board member should not serve on the teachers negotiation teams, but certainly could serve on the support staff negotiation committee, and vice versa. And that's his opinion based on the statutes and the board's conflict of interest policy. So I think that's the gist of
Unless you're a spouse. It's an
Yeah,
administration.
it's pretty clear. No,
I mean,
go ahead.
basically, yeah, with conflict of interest, what you're trying to avoid is any perception of a board member doing something to favor a family member. So that's the perception that could be seen by negotiating that contract.
Can I say something, Coach?
Sure. I'm sorry, I didn't
No
have
problem.
the full view.
As one of the people in question, we could almost call this the Russ North opinion. I mean, let's just call it the way it is. I am confident in the past, there has not been any issue with conflict of interest, and I've
Right.
always acted in the best interest of the district. However, in my profession, there is a very strict code of conduct regarding independence, which is essentially conflict of interest.
Mhm.
And thankfully, Nancy pushed this issue because I had sort of forgotten about the criticalness of the word appearance of conflict of interest. Because
Exactly.
objectively, I know I could be objective, but it would be so easy for somebody to perceive that I had an agenda. And that's what this is really all about.
Mm.
And that is something we all must work very hard to avoid. And in fact, if there was one, this is one of the few cases where there's actually a penalty. I could be fined $1,000 for violating this particular section of the statute. And part of the problem for me is that as somebody who's well-versed in education finance, I mean, in all, maybe immodestly saying I probably understand it as well as any board member in the state, my opinion is asked or about certain things. And I have a concern that if I'm not allowed rightfully to be involved in the teacher negotiation, that sort of takes away I'm not able to necessarily serve my constituents who would expect me to do that very thing. I mean, after all, I'm an accountant, so there is a perception I do numbers. And it becomes even greater because even an innocent question like, can we afford this? Or what's the effect on the budget could be interpreted as an advocacy role for a particular for or against type the budget. So I've been giving it, since the opinion was shared, I have been giving this a lot of thought. And I know I've been waffling, but I'm coming back to the opinion that as I serve, especially if we were going into budget season, it would be an unsatisfactory arrangement for both the constituents and myself, because I want to say something, but I couldn't say something. And I can't vote on the contract, but salaries are such a large part of the budget that really it kind of makes me ineffectual, shall I say. So I have not made a formal decision, but what I would like my fellow board members, and I'm going to make a personal request. I have a daughter who's graduating this year. It's a big deal for her that I'm up on the stage. So I would like to stay on the board through the end of the school year. Then that would give people a chance to find a replacement during the orientation and for the next school year type thing. And if you grant my request, because I want honest opinions, I won't take it personally. Whatever the consensus is, I'll accept that. And going forward, if there's ever a perception I'm not doing my job while I'm still here, I want to hear that too. But I just ask that taken under consideration by my fellow board members.
Well, part of the reason we are and have been so effective, for a pretty good while now, is those types of considerations and taking into account, our, responsibilities as we move forward. We've talked in the past about if and when needed, the responsibility for us as board members, being elected officials, to recuse ourselves at certain points in times from certain actions. And those are tough decisions, especially when they're related to topics and areas that any number of us bring a certain level of expertise to the topic. But again, it goes back to that question of appearance. And I know in a number of the other functions that I do for the town and the state, I find myself in that situation often, asking that question and actually getting consultation. There is an ethics panel that is available in the state, and I use them often. So I know it's a difficult decision, and my personal preference, I would, and I think Russ understands, is he's been a valuable board member and a valuable asset to the school district and all of the owners of the district. And I would hope that we can find a path that would allow him to continue to serve because he does bring a special skill set and abilities and sensitivity to this board. And so that's my feeling, but I had to put it out there.
Coach?
Yes,
Yes.
Peter.
Yes. So, in my opinion, my job is not numbers, my job is words. The opinion that we have received from our attorneys prohibits you from serving on the negotiation committee. In no way does it prohibit you from continuing to deal with budget issues, even though salaries do make up a significant portion of the overall budget, nor does it have any impact at all upon your serving on this board, as long as you wish to do so and the citizens of this town continue to return you to this position. I think there is a distinct difference between serving directly in negotiations and dealing with the myriad of issues that are involved around budgets and how they are generated and so forth. And so I would strongly urge you, this is up to your own conscience, but I would strongly urge you to continue to serve on the board, and that if you do so, you step down from the negotiating committee, but otherwise you continue to do exactly what you have done, enabling, serving this town, this community, and the district by bringing to us the benefits of your skills and your education.
Thank you, Peter. I mean, I will take that under serious consideration. I mean, this is a tough,
I understand.
because if you overanalyze it, which I may have been doing, I can come up with just about everything comes up, and very definitely I am off the negotiation committee.
Right.
Regardless, that's just a fact.
But other than that, I see no issue at all in you voting on the budget. I would say that you can't vote on the ratification of the contract for the teachers. But other than that, I really do not see an issue at all. And may I say that one of the best reactions to the appearance of conflict is exactly what we're doing, which is transparency. If it is clear what is going on, and it is understood by everybody that is going on, and there is no indication that we are in some way attempting to hide the situation, then the appearance issue very quickly diminishes to the point of non-existence.
Fair enough. And I mean, that's why I've not made any final determination, and I need to hear from you, because I mean, the other concern I have is, rightly, if I can't vote on the contract, given the size of the board, the burden, responsibility falls on a more limited number, 3 people. And in some way, I don't think that's fair to the rest of you.
Well, there are many duties that you are taking, not the least of which is acting as the clerk. And many things you have done that do more than your share of the burden of this board. And I, quite frankly, would be very sad to see you go.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed working with you. When you first came on the board as a temporary fill-in position, I, as you remember, urged you to run again. So you could stay with the position, and I was happy that you eventually were in fact elected to this board, because I have thought that you have brought much to this board that has benefited.
Thank you. But we won't mention any names about somebody who beat me that first time.
Yeah.
It was you.
Uh-oh. Well, having beat you, I have to ditto everything that Peter has said.
Did you just second his opinion?
Who's his or his?
Peter's opinion. Are you seconding that Peter's opinion?
I am. I think that you bring so much to this board in the way of, first of all, being a good listener to some of us who call and say, hey, what do you think about this or that? And then you've got so much expertise. And it would just be a real darn shame not to have you here to be able to share that with the rest of us. That, as Peter says, he's not a numbers man. Me either. I'm not either. So it's and you make it seem so clear and so easy when someone asks you about it. You can put it in layman's terms and we understand it. And plus, you're just a good guy. You need to stay on the board. If I understand that you have to do what's right for you, I understand that. And I will back you up either way you go, but I'll back you up better if you'll stay. I won't run against you anymore.
Well, I think Russ is sensing a little, like pattern here. When I think about the technical, aspects,
Yes.
of just public service, you'll notice on the House floor sometimes that a representative will, during a roll call vote, say Rule 75. And when that person indicates Rule 75, what he or she is indicating is that there might be that appearance that we've talked about, in the construct of that vote. And so it's so important for us to be able to do that and to be clear, with the folks that we serve, that we're trying to do the best we can, and we will always give, that nod to doing it correctly. So I keep hearing that, and it being reiterated during our conversation.
And if I may, Coach,
Yes.
one of the facts is we live in a very small community. We know each other. We are related to each other. We work with each other. There is no way to avoid what my wife calls the fishbowl effect. That means that if we were attempting to have people on this board who had no relationship to anything that ever happened in the school, we would not be having any people who could actually run for the board.
I hear you.
That is very common across the entire state.
Right, across the entire state. And I have to say that I think that argument could be made for almost any one of us, because we all have grandkids or children in the school district. We have neighbors in the school district. We can't be engaged in our community and not have a relative, a neighbor, someone we care about who's engaged in the school systems. It's too big of a part of what our community is here. And along those lines, I want to make sure that Russ, you hear that I can't think of a single reason why, should you unfortunately not listen to any of us at all and decide to leave this board, should that happen because you feel compelled in your heart, there's not a single reason why you couldn't stay on to the end of the school year, because no contract negotiations will happen before the end of the school year unless I've completely missed something. So I can't imagine a single reason why you would not be able to be there.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And like I said, I will think some more about it. And I don't want to drag this out because that's not fair to anybody. So I'll be prepared to, quote unquote, give a final response at the next meeting type thing, taking under careful consideration everything that's been shared tonight and which may be shared with me by others. And I think this does tie back to where Roy started with citizenship. Because again, we're demonstrating how a representative democracy should work. Full disclosure and frank discussion in calm, rational manner. So I think we're modeling the behavior we would like to have our students follow.
Absolutely.
Exactly. You know, that comment that we've, heard, the children are watching or our students are watching, that is first and foremost. So I really appreciate the conversation, and that's what we've had. And we've got our fingers crossed now. Tom, looking at the summer retreat and our next segment of our diversity, equity, and inclusion board training. I guess that's the next topic.
Yeah, I just wanted to not really have this discussion tonight, but just get the board thinking about what you would like to do for the May 25th meeting, which is listed as a DEI community engagement meeting. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then also if you're thinking of some sort of summer retreat on a specific topic or topics that we start to flesh that out a little so I can prepare, and if we need a speaker or a facilitator or something like that, I can get planning. Because before you know it, we'll be in the
It's
summer.
there. It's
And
there.
some of the better speakers, the better moderators or facilitators, are really busy. So
Mhm.
we've had good luck with certain people in the past, and they just want to be telling on it. And I'm not sure if you're looking at for the 25th of May, if we're looking at Mary Gannon doing another training with the school board and inviting the select board, or if you're looking for a different speaker or something altogether different. We don't have to decide tonight.
Well,
but we should at least plant the seed to start thinking.
Well, going past planting the seed, I think that we put it on the calendar for a reason. And that is so we do it. The fact that there's a certain amount of continuity with Mary facilitating the DE&I for us, I should say, Dr. Gannon, being that she is the one with actually Dr. Curtis Reed now, performed the equity assessment for the district. I think it puts us in a good position. We have talked about what we'd like to see the next strand be, but I think that it would make sense to, if you don't mind checking with Dr. Gannon about the next piece of this, and then coming back with shared thoughts, or she could come as well and do a piece at the next meeting, business meeting, prior to the actual training. If that makes sense to the rest of the board and to you, Tom.
Coach, I think that does make sense. I would just add, maybe without making promises, we could get more next meeting and then what some follow-on training would be type thing. So it can be a comprehensive A to B to C, whatever, versus she does a great job, but I think we need it to say, this is where we hope to get in terms of our equity and diversity training type thing versus one of sort of scattered, or that may not be the right representation, but a comprehensive strategy for like the next 2 years or something like that. So,
Well, that makes good sense because we do have an equity plan, and the district, was given that during the assessment. And then we developed, a generalized, expectation, which included, adding hiring and staff and things of that sort. So your point's well taken about looking at where we're at in the plan. Which points have we, hit, which ones we still need to continue to work on, and that timeline to get there.
and one last point, I also think this would be a great chance to maybe involve some students or something, so there could be a collaborative type thing, sharing, because one thing, as I've served on HCORI, that's been very helpful, and with my own daughters, is they've helped me realize some of my bad habits, shall I say, that I need, unintentionally, but things, matters of speech I've used for 60 years that really hard to break, but when you're pointed out, are inappropriate. So they have been policing me and helping me. So I do think there would be some merit there. And even the teachers, because that would be, one, it demonstrates our commitment, and two, can be a chance for back and forth.
Well, everything's on the table, as you know. That's what's gotten us this far and will bring us to the next level. So, we'll keep those options open for sure. With intentionality.
Just keep in mind that the summer, what you might want to do.
Yes, yeah, that as well.
Yeah, which is different than, so there's really two things we need to consider. The equity and diversity training, and then what's appropriate for the summer retreat.
Right. Which would be our additional professional development. It's all professional development in a way, but our board professional development other than, there's so much policy work that is constantly going on and changing, that the retreat component really does require direct attention as well. So that's important, I think.
Coach, this is Nancy again. And remember
Yes.
that we have a new person on the SBA who's Phil Gore. And that's what his job is to come in and do trainings with boards and to help them in any way that they need help. This man is excellent. I've been communicating with him quite a bit since they made the announcement 2 months ago. He does live up here now. He is here. He's willing to come and do whatever we need to do whenever we need to do it. So just so we have that maybe in the back of our minds there.
That would be an interesting connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's another, it's another piece to the puzzle. But like I said, as far as keeping, our options open as a board, because we have, access to our community engagement piece, and we have used that not only as an outreach piece, but also as professional development, for the board. That opens up possibilities too, as far as how we might be able to utilize that resource, with community engagement. So thanks for bringing that up, Nancy.
Sure.
Okay, let's see. We're on, geez, that is scary. No, really, I not too much scares me anymore. But I just looked at the clock, you know, at the agenda, and it says at 7:10 we'll do public comments, and my the clock in the top left-hand corner of my computer was on 7:09. I said, "Jeez, that's scary." But anyways, we are at public comment. So Roy, since you are our engagement guru,
No hands are up at this time, Coach.
any other comments from the board?
Actually, yes, if I may.
Great.
Okay, so a while back, Jeff Arnold asked a question at candidates night, and he wasn't happy with the answer I gave it then, so he sent me an email about the question, repeating it and asking me to respond. And I have not yet responded to his repeating the question because it's one of those questions that sort of causes you to think about it a while. And I haven't really come up with the conclusion yet, but I thought I should read the question because it actually is sort of relevant to the public and sort of my thoughts on how I'm trying to answer it, because I'm still not sure what the right answer is to this question. So Jeff's question was, I am still not clear as to what you personally are using as a sign that student outcomes are improving in our schools. What objective data do you use? Have the number of students continuing into higher education showed a steady increase over the last 5 years? Have standardized test scores resulted improved over the same time period? How exactly do you rate the school's performance that you can relay to the taxpayers like myself? Just saying that it is impossible to do so because everyone learns differently and that the schools have a substance that they use is not enough. So this is a very interesting question. And as I said, I have been struggling with this question for a number of months, trying to think about how I can best answer it. And it's an intriguing question because it immediately seems reasonable and a good question to ask. However, the more I think about it, I'm not sure it actually is the right question to ask. And by doing this publicly, I'm trying to engage in a dialogue with both the community and Jeff and be responsive, because I literally haven't been avoiding the question. I've just been trying to figure out what I thought about it. So part of the answer is that, quite frankly, for the last, I've just been thinking about how we get through from one crisis to another. Actual improvement of outcomes and so forth has been less of an issue than just dealing with what we had to deal with. That said, I had early on in my school board career asked about our ability to do longitudinal analysis of the data that was available to us to try to determine whether or not we were getting any kind of objective evidence that things were improving. And in fact, the answer that I got, which still seems to be the answer, is that because we have changed our tests enough times, because the test results are combined in ways that are designed to keep from identifying individuals, because of a lot of different reasons like that, providing objective longitudinal data is almost impossible. Not that it is impossible, but it is extraordinarily difficult. I have actually over the years thought we ought to be employing a graduate student who could take apart all the different kinds of things, do the correlations, and try to provide us with evidence. But we've never actually gotten to the position where we were doing that. But the other answer is that over the years, I've been much less concerned with doing a Deming type of quality improvement process around schools. I really have been thinking much more about process that we attempt to be responsive to the needs of our community and of our students, and making sure that we are doing those things that we can do to enable each student to achieve as much as they are capable of. And that's not quite the same thing as trying to show that year after year we're doing a better job. I would like to think that the outcome of what we are doing is resulting in us doing a better job, but I have no real way of showing that, and I'm not sure that it is possible to do that. So the best answer, and I'm afraid it's not a very good answer to your question, Jeff, is that I'm focusing on the work of the school board, attempting to make sure that the facilities are in good as condition as can be, that we are attracting teachers that are the best that we can attract, that the students have as many possible opportunities to learn, that we are assisting them to the degree we can assist them with problems such as hunger, have different problems at home, mental issues, and so forth. And my only hope is that by paying attention to the details, the outcomes will take care of themselves. So I hope that is an answer.
Coach?
And just to, go ahead,
Well,
Russ, go ahead.
Peter inadvertently led me to a place where I think I'm going to propose something for our summer retreat. I mean, we have our ends policies. And then what we need to do is come up with indicators, because at first we had talked about changing it or maybe modifying it. I don't think we should do that now. I think we should start coming up with measurement tools, however, I mean, tangible, intangible they are, for each of the ends policies. And that would then serve as a basis, because if the end policies deal with both traditional and non-traditional students. I know you're jumping at it, Kathy. Let me finish. Let me finish. But yeah, so I think that would be the way to approach this question, because Jeff is absolutely right. It's a very legitimate question.
Oh, yeah.
And there's many nuances, but that would be a start, because then we'd be able to present evidence. May not be the kind of evidence he suggested, but evidence.
And
I just wanted to point out that we actually have all of the indicators already
Right.
done. Those exist, but the indicators exist already. That work has been done. However, it's not a bad idea to review the ends. And when you do that, possibly those indicators may change as a result
Exactly.
of that.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. But then I would say these indicators need to be reported back to us. Then we can evaluate, because that would be part of the evaluation process of the superintendent. Because we can set expectations knowing you can't do everything in life. There's only finite resources to help us prioritize and go forward, and then makes it easier to say, this is what you're getting for your tax dollar.
so what I'm going to say is this is a continuation of the comment that Peter made as far as answering the question in general, Russ. At the retreat 3 summers ago, we had this same discussion. And what we were assured is that, and I can tell you from going back and looking at some of the other notations, that the administration and schools had been working on the indicators for 2 more years ahead of that. So over a 5-year period, they had been emerging. Everything kind of got jammed up as far as process pieces with COVID. So when you saw Kathy bouncing in her seat, it was because we had asked her to do that, and Roy and Tom and the rest of the admin team. So as far as the indicators themselves, that was a goal and it was achieved. We didn't get a report out because that would have been the next phase as we came into 2020. And as you recall, in March of 2020, that's when the proverbial change occurred. So timing's perfect. You know, there's a lot of qualitative and quantitative data that is part of that process. And, you know, I think that goes into what both you and Peter were talking about. And we're in a fortunate position as a school district to have a full breadth of offerings for our students, not just locally, but regionally, because we've got a pre-K-12 educational system and a technical education system as well. So we can offer a wide range of options, you know, for our students. And I'll just give one quick anecdote that, you know, I got a comment from one of our constituents who was talking about her grandson being offered a position as he completed the culinary arts program. And he was thinking about going on to a culinary institute program, but the offer that he was made based on his work ethic and what he had learned, you know, in our culinary program, put him in a position where, you know, he's doing very well for himself, you know, as a sous chef. So, you know, those kinds of things, we've got that data, and it would be interesting, you know, to hear back. Tom, I know that when you put the new student data systems in place, being able to pull, you know, where the students' goals were and where they are, was a question that we had asked you. And as I recall, that was within the range of applicability of the system to tell us, you know, what was the end result of our students' time here in Hartford. Because that's a question we kept asking, you know, like the principal of high school. So where are kids going? What are they doing? You know, what is that end game? Which is another piece to this discussion. But
So I would push that maybe our retreat be this, talk about the indicators that they have, talk about how they're measured. Then the board could sign off on, okay, this is a reasonable indicator, this is not, because if we're going to go forth with evaluating success, we all have to agree that this is how we're going to measure success. And then from there, talk about how then we could modify the reporting to, because it's going to be a process, to report back on what we've all agreed were the indicators and what we were going to focus on, type thing. And that closes the loop. And it may not fully answer Mr. Arnold's question, but I think we're going to get a lot closer to.
Closer, you got it.
Yeah, because it's a continuous process.
You got it, my friend.
Sounds like I'm committing myself.
That's right.
We're on the right path. We're on the right path.
Yeah, I think that plan sounds terrific. Rather than revisit the ends and modify them, let's follow through on what we've already started.
That's good.
And then you'll be better informed if you do want to tweak or change the ends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
how.
Yeah.
But we had done a tremendous amount of work on the indicators.
Oh, yeah.
Several summers.
And the proficiencies.
And proficiencies.
Mhm.
Yeah, cross-section of staff from the entire district and administrators, and
Yeah.
we were getting very, very heavily into it, and then things were sidetracked.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, the other thing just to keep in mind is that we are balancing all that work with all the other state and federal requirements, so
Mhm.
it's part of what we have to do.
Mhm.
It's not everything.
So one last point.
But go ahead, Russ.
Is then maybe for somebody, an outsider to come in, somebody who would be helpful in helping design the measure, like the final measurement, reporting and criteria of this whole process might be somebody. And it might, we may want to think about somebody we haven't used, because I mean, I think we really need an objective look and some quote unquote honest feedback. We may not like, at least the board, at the board level, I'm not the honest feedback, but I think that would be the end. That would be a nice way to close it all up.
And that is part of Phil Gore's job,
Exactly
to
what I
come
was
in
gonna
and
say.
do those assessments for the boards, to look and see where he might situate whatever we're asking him to evaluate us on. Okay, that is part of his job. He's got years and years and years of experience of just doing this kinds of things.
Well, I think to Russ's question and to yours, and then back to what Tom was saying. I think we've already determined what our retreat topic, will be, and what we could hope for an outcome would be coming up with possibly a proposal for an analysis. And as we look at offering an RFP of sorts, or a request for proposals to assist us with that, we could reach out to him as well as a couple other entities for that response. Because there are a number of organizations that do exactly that, both at the secondary and post-secondary level. So I think we've kind of put together, we've answered more questions than we realize.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Great. Let's see. As we look at monitoring. So Roy, any hands since?
No hands up, coach.
Okay, so I guess we'll move to the consent agenda. Monitoring reports, meeting minutes, appointments, resignations, and retirements.
Well, let me get my list of appointments out. So we have several appointments already, so bear with me, and I can get you this list, Sharon. Patrick Kelly is the high school special ed teacher. We'd like to appoint Anna Sarasoli, new teacher, special ed at the White River School. Sarah McKinney, special ed teacher at the Regional Resource Center. Art Rathis, special ed at the high school. Chance Lindsay, special educator at the Regional Alternative Program, which is part of the Wilder School. Alexander Keeley, special ed at the high school. Stephanie Cross, new teacher at the Ottaquiche School. Morgan Fisk, a new teacher kindergarten at the Ottaquiche School. Cassandra Lockwood, second graded out of Gucci School. Juliana Miller, she is a new special educator at the White River School, and Olivia DeFelice, fourth grade at Dothan Brook School. A lot of those are teachers that were here. They were hired after July 1, so they're both 1-year hires, and they did well, and we want to bring them back. So that's why there's so many so early.
Cool.
And there's a few resignations. Anisha Betweiser, Dothan Brook School, Emma Collins out of Queechee School, Laura Berman at Tenney House, which is special educator, early ed special educator. Jeff Thomas at Hartford High School, Logan Bent out of Queechee School, Catherine Fitchie, Dothan Brook, Christina Wild at Dothan Brook, Patty Hodgden Dickman as a school psychologist, Kim Dumont, teacher at the middle school, Dave Chop, middle school, and Candy Culver is retiring at the middle school. A lot of those are people that are either leaving the profession or retiring, or moving, family moves elsewhere. You'll see a lot of that over the next couple of meetings.
And just so the public, understands that dynamic as well. The upper valley is fairly mobile, in the sense that, for example, when a family moves in to do graduate work, either at the college or the medical school, sometimes their partner might have a specialized education degree, and they're highly qualified for a position. And we've had, Tom come back to us and say, geez, I wish she'd decide to stay, and the family would decide to stay at the hospital. And, and so some of that mobility is due to that nature and that piece of mobility.
Six of those 11 are moving out of the area, like out of the region. Three of those 11 are moving, are retiring or leaving the profession, and 2 others are moving to administration positions. So it's not always what it appears.
Which is important. Which is important for, I think, board members and for the public to understand as well.
And we remember we have 230 plus teachers, so dealing with the small percentage. And most of the appointments are people that are affiliated with us already. They've either taught here for the year or done internships or substitute teaching here. So feel pretty good about the list.
I have a quick clarifying question, Tom. Hannah Saraswati is being hired as a teacher?
Yes, a teacher for next fall.
I just want to say for the record, congratulations, Hannah. I'm really proud of you.
Yeah.
Hannah was my Girl Scout way back when, and so.
She's been a paraprofessional here for 10 years, I think.
Long time. She's just finishing up her degree now.
Yeah. Hannah also worked for me at the daycare.
Did she
Finishing up
really?
this spring, and we're hiring.
Yeah. Well, I think we're awful smart to do that.
Does anybody have any questions, changes around the minutes? If not,
So what are we voting on, just on minutes?
well, we're gonna do the.
Whole consent?
The consent agenda.
I have to recuse myself from the consent agenda due to a conflict of interest.
You can separate that piece out and vote on it in 2 motions, or you can.
I mean, I don't know if that's necessary.
Or you can vote on 2.
So I would like to move that we approve the consent agenda, that we welcome the new members of the school district, and that we give our thanks and gratitude to those who are leaving.
I second that.
So we have a motion and a second. And why don't we do a roll call since we're in this virtual? And we'll start with Russ.
I recuse myself.
And Peter,
Approve?
Nancy,
Approve?
Hava,
Approve?
and myself approve. So the record is clear. So that brings us to the meeting evaluation.
Coach,
Yes.
sorry to jump in. It looks like we have one question from a member of the public.
Oh,
Should we take that or keep going?
no. We should take it before the evaluation, because then we'll be moving into executive session in another space. And then we'll come out.
Christina Tardy has her hand up to speak.
Yes. Christina? You can unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. I would like to make a public comment, and I wasn't sure when was a good time to do it, but so I'm going to make a comment that
Yeah, we had asked before, but go ahead. You can.
Okay. So the comment can be related to Mr. Russell, so I hope he does stay on the board with the understanding that when there's salary negotiations, he's not going to be able to say anything about it. And I just want to make the public comment that in the legislative session, it feels like there's a big talk about the state education fund moving from being more on the property based towards more on the income based. And I know, again, when is the good time to talk about this? Because I don't know. There were one bill, S287, where they were talking about improving student equality by adjusting the school funding formula, so something with weights, and superintendents were involved, and it sounded like they were okay with that. And then there's a big thing going on with the education finance restructuring, and I think it was Bill S212, and now it feels like it's not a bill anymore. I don't know, but it's a huge change that is going to happen within 2 years, because I think this change will happen, but nobody knows how it will happen. So going forward, I think the school board does need somebody that understands weights and formulas and how finances work, because there's a big change that's going to happen in the next 2 years. And that's my public comment. And thank you very much for me having me here.
Christina, thank you very much. One of my other hats is being actively involved in tracking those procedural changes. Because I'm there, I'm able to share information with our administration and our finance group, and with Mr. North directly as things are changing. And that really puts us in a pretty unique situation, I feel, because of that continuum of information. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to to do that as well, because it does help the process and the understanding of what's happening. So thank you for your comment, Christina, as always.
Yeah, we're really on top of the whole weighting proposal. So I got a a long explanation last week at a superintendent's meeting, and we'll be going to another training next week. So pretty involved with that one. It is going to be a lot of change. We're still not sure
Yeah.
what the final legislation will be, but it will also be sort of phased in so that there's not an impact on any one district in any one year, but it will change our funding formula, how we are paid for the number of students that we have. Right now, it looks very favorable for Hartford. Who knows what will happen as it goes through the Play-Doh Fun Factory, as I like to call it. Sort of never know what shape it's going to come out, but right now it looks favorable.
And that's all the indication that, Tom has shared, from our business office, back to Becca and myself. So we'll continue to lobby, in the direction that we are for the change in that process. So I guess that being done, the meeting evaluation.
Now, it is in your packet, you have hard copies. If I didn't get it. I think I got it covered
As a
every which
conflict of
way.
interest, I'll just say y'all want me to stay, so.
See what you doing? Or you want me because of your voice? All right.
All
All right, you were good.
Sure.
Oh, good, wonderful.
All right.
I'm the default person. I'm always bad to pass it on to somebody else.
Today's date, what are we on, the 7th?
6th.
Six.
I don't want to speed things along. All right. At the end of the board meeting, each board member and the superintendent or an appointed evaluator for the meeting completes this monitoring form. Responses are shared and a discussion is held on the areas that need improvement. The chair collects this form and to use for the board's monitoring reports. 1, the board was prepared for the meeting. Mark that as satisfactory. The board's time was spent on ends, not means. Satisfactory. Each board member was given an opportunity to participate. Satisfactory. Board treated all persons with courtesy and fairness. Satisfactory. Board adhered to Robert's Rules of Order. Satisfactory. Board adhered to its adopted governance style. It emphasized outward vision. It encouraged diversity in viewpoints. It exercised strategic leadership, not administrative detail. It maintained distinction between board and staff roles. It used collective decision-making. It looked to the future. Say satisfactory. Any additional comments to include? All right.
Thank you, Ms.
Down
Howard.
the road. There you go.
Then pursuant to 1 VSA section 313C3, I move that we find that a executive session is necessary to discuss the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee, provided the public shall make a final decision to hire or appoint a public official, a public officer or employee in an open meeting and shall explain the reasons for its final decision during the open meeting. I further move that the board enter into an executive session to discuss the evaluation of a public employee under the provisions of, again, Title I, Section 313C1 of the Vermont statutes.
Can I just make a point, Coach, before we vote?
Sure.
Since we've acknowledged that I have a conflict of interest going forward, I think it would be appropriate to just notify me before a vote that this is a matter that falls under that conflict. This may not.
This
but-
does not.
Okay, but going
No,
forward,
this
be
does not.
cognizant of that, just so it's absolutely clear, and then I would just go with the rest of the public and recuse myself.
And that would be customary as we move forward.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Okay, that is Coach.
So all in favor? We have a motion and a second on the floor to go into executive session as per noted. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. Tom sent us a link to the executive session. And that should be up near the top of your email.
So I think what we do is dismiss the current meeting. Say thank you,
Right.
everybody. You will convert us over to the new meeting, or
Well,
Yes.
I don't have to.
yeah,
Okay.
he'll just sort of shut off.
okay,
I'm gonna have, but if
Right.
it's for this executive session, I'm gonna have to mute this.
okay,
Yeah.
So let me know when you want that done.
okay. So,
You can mute now.
And they
And,
won't be able to hear you.
okay,
so
well, that's okay. Coach will meet us on the other side and
Have a good night, everyone.